Friends, welcome to another episode of the Nation's Weekly Podcast. It is so good to be with you. I'm Joseph Carlson.
And I'm Joel Parker.
And really, this weekly podcast is just two buds, in some ways.
Steeped with curiosity.
Yeah, practicing the spiritual discipline of curiosity.
Ooh, I like that.
Yeah, so that's how to make it sound serious.
Yeah.
When really, we're just curious about the world, and particularly about incredible and interesting people who are willing to go places and do things.
Really, we have a very shallow faith. So Nations is all about interviewing people with a deep, mature faith. And so, we've got a good one for you today.
Please keep our faith alive.
That's right.
No pressure.
Today on the podcast, we have a dear friend of mine. His name is Mark Palm. You may have watched my interview with him. I don't know, was that 2 years ago, 3 years ago?
Yeah. They probably didn't because there's probably like 10 people that were following.
That's true. We are growing this platform as we speak. So Mark is the founder of Samaritan Aviation, which currently serves some of the most remote areas of Papua New Guinea with aviation transportation and life-threatening medical emergencies. I have been on the ground in Papua New Guinea and seen them firsthand. It's absolutely incredible. Mark has served in Papua New Guinea. I think they started Samaritan Aviation in early 2000s with his wife Kirsten and 3 kids. And Mark is also a pickleball champion. You may not know that, and also a cancer survivor. So without further ado, welcome to the podcast, Mr. Mark Palm.
Hey guys, great to be here.
We'll never have anybody like you here again. Pickleball champion. When? How?
Yeah, that's a whole story in itself. And the funny story is it kind of really came with cancer. It's one of those things, was a byproduct of cancer, really, because I ended up with a port in my chest, and I couldn't surf anymore or be really active in the water sports that I was into. So it was kind of pickleball was my outlet. And as I recovered from a chemo round, you'd get done with chemo after a week, can't get out of bed. And for first 2 days, because your white blood cells are shot. And so as you get energy, then I would kind of know how my body was feeling, whether I could go out and play a game. So I'd show up at the pickleball court and I'd go on play with the old people initially. And social side, and I'd be shaky and I'd get like 1 game in, and then I'd go home, and the next day I'd come and I could play 2 games. And then that's kind of how it was like a mental thing. Like, I got to get outside, I got to go do something. And then I just kept getting better and better at it, and I'm very competitive. So I was like, I should compete. And so that's what we did, and ended up with a national championship.
So now you're national champion. So when was that? It was just a month or two ago?
Yeah, a couple months ago.
Amazing.
2022 national champ.
Congratulations.
And, it's a great outlet, and it's what's cool is actually I raise money for Samaritan through my pickleball community now.
Wait, how do you do that?
It's just meeting people. If you meet me, you hear about New Guinea, you hear about what we do. And
so there's just some average Joe playing pickleball on a random Wednesday, and they're like, so what do you do for a living? And you're like, let me tell you.
Yeah, and it turns into a long conversation, and then they're watching a film about it, or then if they San Diego TV stations have done some stories on us in different newspapers, and then
everywhere
also
you go,
they'll see it, and then it's like, hey, we want to support you, and I had a director of a pickleball tournament had me come and present, to all the players and have a booth. And so, it's like, for me, I use whatever platform I have to tell my story and what God's doing. And what comes out of that usually is support, partnerships, and new and amazing opportunities to minister.
It's a great development strategy.
I was gonna say, it's actually really shrewd because, so pickleball, fastest growing sport in the U.S., right? Also, geriatrics love it. So part of your story is almost actually like a Benjamin Button story. Like, you started out old and decrepit because you were playing as you're recovering from cancer, and then you just slowly get more youthful, and then end up
dominating.
Yeah, well, it's kind of like that. Yeah.
And hey, in theory, if you're playing against all the old retirees at the club, they've got.
It makes you feel good about yourself,
It makes you feel good about yourself, and also they got money that they use to invest in incredible kingdom initiatives like Samaritan Aviation.
Absolutely.
Dude, that's beautiful.
It's incredible.
It's been cool. Joel's still talking a bit of smack because he doesn't know what he doesn't know. But someday we will get out there and he'll get. He'll learn.
I'm a tennis player, so pickleball is kind of like, it's like tennis and ping pong had a baby, so it's more on the ping pong side of things. So you're an old youth pastor though, as am I. So maybe it'll be the duel of the old.
Ministry too.
Yeah. The key word should be you used to be a tennis player, I think, and is still trying to figure out pickleball.
The chirping. See, we spent literally about 8 minutes together in Papua New Guinea, like complete strangers, and then we went from like strangers to brothers who are just like at each other in the best possible way.
Awesome.
Anyways,
we have so much fun. Yeah,
we're just too much alike. So, Mark, I want to kind of dive in a little bit. The reason we wanted to have you on the podcast is because we're featuring you in a full year-long documentary where we're showing what's happening at Samaritan Aviation, which I think is one of the most fascinating things I've ever seen. Bush planes and missionaries, and it's like going to where you live and operate is like opening the pages of National Geographic. It's unlike any place I've ever been. And so I'd like to, I just want to bring kind of our audience into your reality and kind of bring them into this dispatch series, Papua New Guinea. So tell us a little bit about Samaritan Aviation. Tell us a little bit about how you started at Samaritan Aviation, your love for aviation and as a whole. And let's go down that road.
Yeah, quick version. My grandfather was a World War II pilot. Uncles were pilots. My dad was a minister. As a high schooler, I worked in a homeless mission that my dad ran up in Northern California. Had a chance to do something for people that was tangible. Ended up in Mexico with my church youth group to build houses for less fortunate. Saw another culture, that really shocked me. People living in cardboard boxes, not very far from the border, and just the need was so tangible. And then doing something for somebody, give them a house. How amazing is that? But then doing it in the name of Jesus and sharing who Jesus is, and the reason why we were there. And as a high schooler, had just had a moment where God spoke to me, clearly called me during a devotional on an old abandoned well, and it was like, okay. What I heard was, Mark, I want you to use your passion for people in aviation to share my love in a remote part of the world. 16, I come back to Santa Cruz. It's like, what do I do with that call? And it was so clear, and I ended up at a Bible school in Florida, met a friend there. We went to Papua New Guinea in 1994. Kind of fit the bill for the most remote places in the world. Aviation, the needs for aviation there is incredible. 80% of the people live in some of the most remote communities in the world, and specifically what we saw was water areas with people that had no access or hope with medical emergencies, and how we could bring a float plane. There hadn't been a float plane in New Guinea since 1960, and how could we bring a float plane in there as a tool to reach these large rivers and change a 3-day trip to a hospital into a 1-hour flight. And not only how could we do that, but how could we do that and not charge the people for any of it, and have it be a mercy mission with a chance to share Jesus. And being called to be a missionary myself, I didn't want to just go fly. I didn't feel called to just go fly other missionaries around, which is something other organizations are doing they're doing a fantastic job. But for me, it was like I was called to get in there in the village, to be in with the people, and to use a plane to be able to do that. And the journey was long. The vision came in '94. The name for the organization came in 2000, and it took 10 years telling the story to finally get to New Guinea in 2010 with my wife and 3 kids, Sierra, Drake, and Nolan, 4, 5, and 7-year-olds, and to show up on our own. I put the plane back together out of a 40-foot container. It took me a week to do that. Flew it 400 miles into the capital, and it was like people, even other organizations, are looking at me like, "Who is this guy? What are you doing?" How
sketchy is it to like? I mean, you obviously went to 2 years of mechanic school. It's part of the whole missionary pilot training stuff, but like to get a crate with an airplane in it and you put it together, I would be a little. I can't even put Legos together, and so I'm in awe of your ability to do that.
Well, it was, it was kind of interesting, and it's the power of the call. I think, for me, I didn't change my oil in high school one time. I did zero mechanical stuff. I had friends that would soup up their cars and all this stuff. I had no interest in that. But when I was called, I knew that if I couldn't fix an airplane, I couldn't do the job God called me to. So I ended up going 2.5 years of mechanic school, and then I ended up working in a shop for 5 years to gain the experience that I knew I would need to actually put a plane together. And that's just part of responding to the call. There's, it's not all the things that you want to do necessarily, but there's things you need to do to be successful. And for me, having a mechanic's license, it was a game changer. We could have never launched Samaritan if I didn't have that ability. And so never was one of my favorite things to do, but it was one of those things I had to learn and be good at. And I'm still here, so I didn't, I put the plane together properly. That's the good news.
So yeah, I was kind of curious. So is that like getting licensed as a mechanic, spending 5 years working in the shop? Is that part of what was happening in that almost like 10-year gap between when you got the name and kind of clarified the vision before you guys were actually able to get over to Papua New Guinea?
Yeah, part of that, I was just finishing school when we launched Samaritan in 2000. And then, yeah, working as a mechanic, I did a lot of things. I sold real estate. I worked in construction. It's kind of whatever needed to happen to finally get to a point where I could go on 1 day a week at Samaritan, and then finally was able to go on full time.
How do you not? I mean, that's a long time
It's
to
a
be
long-
patient and persistent in pursuing a vision and a calling. Like, how did you find the strength to do that? I mean, it'd be really easy to just give up and settle down. Like, oh well, real estate, you can make a good buck there, and just be like, maybe I didn't hear God correctly.
Well, I think the thing is God doesn't always go on our timeline. We had a 5-year plan. We took a photo with our wives in front of someone else's airplane, and we mailed that out to 330 people, and we thought, oh, the money's going to roll in, and I think we raised $330 out of that mail out, but honestly, when the call was just so strong, it was like, I guess people didn't really hear me well, and we had a nice little logo, and we didn't have an airplane, and that was the worst question. And when someone would say, "Hey, what kind of airplanes you guys fly in?" And it's like, well,
We don't.
we got a nice logo
Not
here.
yet. So
And you just kept telling the story. And I think the thing is like you can see God moving a lot of times when you look backwards. And even though we weren't getting as fast to where, as quickly as we thought we would, there was always progress. Every year I could look back and say, okay, God did that. God did that. And it just kind of actually increased my faith and strengthened it. And it was just like, well, this is going to happen. And the call was so strong. It was like, I don't know, people would say, oh, you're still here. And, it got discouraging at times. I'm not going to lie that, when someone you respect looks at you and says, what is this, a joke? This is in your 10th year here. What's going on? And people are giving money for this. You're trying to buy airplanes and figure out what you're doing. But it was just, God was clear. And my wife was a trooper as well. She, I told her over and over again, hey, babe, we're leaving in 6 months, so we can't get too involved in the community where we're at and all these things. 6 months later, we're leaving in 6 months. And I drug her through that for about 4 years. But, she believed. And, when we finally got there, we were so relieved. We just were just so excited to finally implement what God had shown us. But I think, it's part of God's call in all of our lives is the journey, and we wouldn't have been ready to go, 5 years before.
How so?
We just weren't mature enough spiritually. We weren't mature enough as people. I didn't have enough experience as a leader. And we didn't have the financial resources, the government connections and relationships. And so all of that you build up over time. And, they say God's timing is perfect, and it's been true in my life.
So was there a tipping point where you guys went from just breaking your backs to try and raise funds and cast a vision, and you got over that tipping point and you were able to finally get over to Papua New Guinea and have a plane, and or is it a long slow climb?
There was no tipping point. I remember 4 months in, we were down to $5,000 in the account. We didn't have enough money to go home. Tickets home were more than what we had in the bank, and we were running out of fuel. And I remember one of my buddies actually calls me from the States, and he says, hey, I came into some money through some business things, and I want to give you guys a donation. And he named a number, and I was just blown away because the number he'd never given up to that point. And he ended up sending double in what he told us. But he didn't even know we were down to $5,000. And he just called me and he's like, hey, this settlement came in. We're going to send some money in. But those miracles happen, and we call them God stories, but they just happen over and over again. We've never been that organization that was sitting around with a pile of cash wondering what to do with it. It's always been like God just continues to bring us back to our knees and just says, hey, this is your thing, and it's like, that's just keeps your faith strong. And it's a faith walk, that's what this is. And that's what life is. And we have a goal to reach 1 million people in the next 10 years over there, to be serving 1 million people. We're serving 300,000 right now. And to get there. It's a huge goal, but we know God's in it and it's His plan, and we just got to keep working and doing our part.
So talk to us about that. I know in the second episode of the Dispatch series, we journey down with you to Kapuna Hospital. And so that's a big part of the expansion of Samaritan Aviation. So what are you facing right now as you look at scaling Samaritan Aviation to reach more people, to hit that number of 1 million people?
Yeah, I think God really spoke to me clearly last summer. I was over in June, and we were looking at whether we knew we were expanding to the south side, and it was between Gulf and Western province, 2 provinces there that both have the same issues. It's lots of water, no roads, remote communities that don't have access or hope for medical emergencies, and so I was sitting with the government leaders in Karama, and the capital of the Gulf province, and I put a map of the Gulf province up on I had a little projector. I stuck it up I was in this dingy little office and this dirty wall, and I just stuck the picture of this map up there. And I said, guys, I was with the rural health director, the provincial administrator, the hospital CEO, and some doctors. And I said, guys, where are you reaching? This place is 150 nautical miles wide. We're in the capital. You guys have your budget. How far out are you getting? And they drew a little circle. It was about 30 miles out into 150 miles. And there's just rivers. And I've flown over in a helicopter of this area a few years ago, and there was like a guy sailing a canoe with a palm frond as a sail.
Wow.
And I'm like, who's out there? And every time I'd ask that question, nobody could give me an answer. They're like, well, no one's been out there in 10 or 15, 20 years. We don't even know who's living out there. And so I'm sitting here like, there's water, we have float planes, we are called to reach those communities. And I looked at them and I said, well, what about those people in those remote villages? And I pointed to this area on the map where there's river and water. And I said, what about those people? What happens when they have a medical emergency? What happens when they have a breech birth, snake bite, tuberculosis, any type of trauma? And I'll never forget the lady that was in charge of rural health. She looked at me and she just kind of offhandedly, she said, well, they're just used to dying. And I just sat there and I just felt God just speak so clearly. It was like, this is why you're here. Mm-hmm. This is why you're here. And that's where we're going, the Gulf. And in the middle of the Gulf, there's this hospital at Kapuna that's been there 60 years. They've done an amazing job of bringing up Papua New Guinean staff. They have a discipleship training school. They have some medical training school as well, but they have no way to get people from those remote communities into that hospital. So the capacity's there, the staffing's there, and I feel like the time is now for us to get over there to start working with them. They've officially now invited us over to come and join, to give us some property to build our houses, to put a hangar on the river for our 2 airplanes. So that is happening. It's official. I'm actually going to be over there next month with my wife. We're going to fly the float plane over to Kapuna middle of next month and have more meetings with the hospital and the leadership. The government's come on board. We signed an MOU with them in September, which was incredible. I don't know anybody other than, it's another God thing, like to go in there to get an MOU signed with the government in a couple of weeks. So a memorandum of understanding, okay. we would say like a partnership agreement. Okay. Which is required for them to fund, right? And so to get that done as quickly, it was another God thing. And then I was just told by the governor 2 weeks ago that we're on the budget for $800,000 US this year to help with expansion costs. And so it's incredible. Just God's doing some just crazy
and you got a new
stuff.
Airplane.
And I was over there in September with one of our donor families, and I get done with this meeting, and he looks at me and he says, I guess now it's time to get your next airplane. And I was like, okay, awesome, let's do this. And so we found the plane in Minnesota, and I literally, I flew it out from Colorado a couple weeks ago. It's in Phoenix right now. It's going into the paint shop in a few weeks. It's getting interior done, a bunch of stuff. We got to raise some money to get all the modifications done on it, but it's unbelievable. We have that plane. The third plane, the first plane for Gulf, is actually going in a container in the next 3 weeks. That'll be on its way to Papua New Guinea. Yeah, there's a lot of cool stuff happening, and God's real, and we're just trying to keep up right now. Honestly, it's
incredible.
It's
and
awesome.
I think what's so encouraging about your story is like the payoff of faithfulness. I think you're just naturally courageous. You have a strong spirit. You're like you're just a tough dude. And so I look at your story and I think about how, for 10 years, you're just planning and preparing. And I know how you like to do things and do it quick. And so that's, the act of just patience is amazing. And then the journey of actually going over there. And we cover a lot of stories. I did a documentary in Iraq and during war, and I felt safer in Iraq than I did in Papua New Guinea with you, just because of, you're telling me stories like, oh yeah, last week, like they, this a volleyball game went bad, and so they start blowing up each other's houses, and you're just driving down the street where that happened, and that's normal to you, and just like, oh yeah, we had a person visiting who got attacked by a machete, and just like all these stories, and so talk to us a little bit about the adversity of how difficult Papua New Guinea is. I don't think many people understand that. Yeah, they see the exotic display of jungle and an island nation and all this stuff, but like talk to us about like just the danger and choosing to bring your family into that danger.
Yeah, it's an interesting. My wife had a great quote one time. She said, "The safest place to be is in the center of God's will," and that was when someone asked her that same question about bringing your family to Papua New Guinea. I don't know. It's they call it the last frontier for a reason, all law and order ends at town, and that's not very good. So out in the bush areas where we work, there's no law and order at all. And if the law does come out there, it's very violent, just because they're trying to rule through intimidation and fear. So a lot of what happens out there is village justice. And so I liken it to like Wild West, back in the, early 1800s in the States. But it's a wild country. It's an eye for an eye culture. So you're kind of starting with that. If you hurt me, I hurt you. And the challenge is that they don't hurt you. They hurt whoever's in your village. So everybody's at risk. So it's your daughter's at risk. Your father's at risk if you do something bad. So it causes everyone to live in fear. And that's a tough place. And then you add the animistic belief system. Anything you don't understand is sorcery, or it's sanguma, as they call it. Somebody put a curse on you. There's spirits at work, crocodiles turning into men and walking around. I mean, there's just stories, and there's spirit houses there where the belief system's still very strong.
Which is wild, because when I think of Papua New Guinea, I always think of like, oh, that's where every missionary goes. It's like either, it's like as common as a youth group going down to Tijuana, Mexico to build a house is like, I feel like so many missionaries go to the PNG. And if you look at like the statistics on, or look it up on Wikipedia, it's like, oh, it's a 95% Christian nation. Yeah. And your account is obviously much different than what is being.
Yeah. I think it's like any place, it's easy to give statistics and numbers and when you're on the ground, and I'm not discounting any other missionary organization, but it's an ongoing battle, and it's a worldview that's so far from ours that to understand grace, there's no word for grace in a lot of the languages over there. There's 840 languages there. What is grace? You're trying to explain that. Like just that simple thing of a gift without a free gift, right? That you don't deserve. What does that mean?
Right.
So trying to model that through what we do, where we don't charge for flights and we come in as a free service with the only thing you have to do is get on the plane, right? And that's all we require. Get on the plane and we'll take you and help save your life. That's a starting entry point into what grace is. Yeah. It gives us a platform to then talk about who Jesus is and what he's done. But it's a constant battle, because when you've been raised a certain way your whole life and you see things from a certain angle, it's a lot of discipleship is bringing people back into line with Scripture. Mm-hmm. When the fear comes, and I could tell you story after story. I don't know how many stories you want today, or how much storytelling I can do, or how graphic I could be.
If it's a good one, then you're free to share it. But if it's a lame one, then we'll just cut it out.
Okay. Well, so I'll give you a story of our staff. Right, we have a staff member who's been working with us for 10 years. That goes to church regularly. He comes into the hangar one day and he says, "Mark, Just wanted you to know there's a bad spirit up on the hill, because they live up on the there's a little hill behind the airport in their bush house. He said there's a bad spirit that's coming up here, and I just want you to know I might need to call you, in the middle of the night and have you come help me. And I'm like, okay, let me know, how you're doing. And we prayed about it. And a few days later, he comes in and hey, how you doing? He's like, oh, the bad spirit came to our house last night. And his son's name, Mark, is named after me, it's a huge honor. But he's like, so he's telling me a story. He's like, he's 5 years old. He said he came into little Mark, and I said, well, what did you do? He said, he said, I had him pee in a cup and then drink the urine. And then when he threw up, the evil spirit left him and went off. And, that just opened a conversation to like, okay, well, let's talk about this,
Yeah.
Who is Jesus? How powerful is Jesus? Who's the big spirit? Who's got the most powerful spirit? That's the Holy Spirit, and that's Jesus. And we went back to Scripture, but that's the first thing is to go back to what you've been taught.
Right.
And there's still places they're marking witches in New Guinea. If something unusual happens, they believe that someone ate the heart out of the guy who had a heart attack or whatever in the spirit world. And then they'll mark witches and they'll torture them, and this is happening in the mountains, especially, and in some of the upper areas where we're at. Still happening.
It's so fascinating to me that your guys' the ministry and the service that you're providing to this remote population is such a holistic one. I mean, it's healthcare, right? I mean, it's obviously crisis and emergency is the primary aim that you guys have. But from what I understand, that's kind of a starting point where you guys are then trying to help them understand and practice better healthcare in different ways and use that as building up the community's overall health. But how so this is a really physical, tangible, bodily sort of thing, but it intersects so often and powerfully with the spiritual realities that you're contending with over there and that are have really shaped the people's hearts and imaginations. So that just strikes me for some reason. I don't know if I have a specific question there, other than it just seems, I don't know, maybe appropriate actually.
Yeah, I mean, you're talking about, how you believe about the spirit world or about who we are as believers shapes the rest of our life, right? It shapes everything. It shapes how you react to good things, how you react to bad things, what your expectations are out of life, and so for us, we have a big part of what we do is a hospital ministry. When we bring these patients from the middle of the bush, they've never been in an airplane, they've never seen the ocean, they've never seen a vehicle or electricity a lot of times, and then you pick them up in this very traumatic time where they feel like they know in the past their loved one has died from whatever that you're picking them up for, and so you're basically doing something they've never seen, which is to get them to help in a lot of ways, and then they're all of a sudden they're in the middle of this more developed kind of area with cars and electricity, and they're in a town, they're afraid, they don't know anyone. And so then we have a team that goes in every day, prays with them. If they don't have clothes and they need clothes, feeds them, gives them clothes, feeds them, and just shares Jesus. And we also give them audio Bibles in their own language. And it's just a lot of times it's their first point of contact with who Jesus is. And we're kind of the tip of the spear, and that's exciting, and that's what we do on a regular basis. We flew 23 patients in last week, and everyone has a caregiver. That's 46 people that we're serving and ministering to in the hospital, and our team is amazing, and everyone is just passionate. We're here to share Jesus, and we have gifts, and we can save your life, but it's all about where you're going for eternity.
Real simple, practical question, and I think you have one. Okay, so you're serving these super remote villages. How are you getting the calls for?
Yeah, so in the early days, it was HF radio, so high frequency radio, which is like a ham radio. Now they've dropped some cell phone towers along the river. So there's still a lot of times they'll run 30 minutes, climb a coconut tree to get the reception, or they'll climb a mountain to call us. But that's how they do it now. There's usually the 8 posts that we serve, the 48 posts that we bring medical supplies into, and so they all have our information and they know where the cell towers are at. And then we also have villages, if they're not near a 8 post, that one person usually has a cell phone. And sometimes they'll paddle 3, 4, 5 hours to get to a place to call us.
Just so crazy. Everybody has cell phones now.
It's wild. I remember
it is wild.
It used to be like, the white guys show up with the cameras. Now the white guys show up, everyone else has the cameras. They're like, look at white guys. They're taking photos. So, anyway. All right. I'm ready. I'm ready for a little story time with Uncle Mark. So if you would turn your attention to the screen, tell us about this moment right here.
Oh, geez. So, not my finest moment, I'll tell you, as an aviator.
We're just really here to honor you.
But thanks for bringing this up. At the time of this photo was taken, I didn't know how bad a shape we were in.
We were ignorant at the moment.
Yeah. We had no idea what a pickle we were in. Not to use a pickleball term. But this is an area, there's never been a float plane that's ever landed here, I can assure you. We were out in the middle of nowhere, and it really came as your fault, Joel, because you couldn't figure out how to turn the camera on out on the wing. And you said, hey, guys, I need to land so I can turn the camera on, because we had a camera out, a GoPro. So we landed in a spot in the middle of nowhere to get the camera working. And we kind of wanted, it was like, well,
look at it. It's also, we flew in over that ridge right there. And
incredible beauty. And this beautiful river.
Yeah.
And it was a big pile looked like sand from the air, and it was a big pile of rocks once we got there. So I was thinking, I get to a spot and just, pull over like I normally do, beach the plane, we'll jump out, do whatever we need to do, get the camera working. And what I didn't know is how shallow it was from the edge of the river. And so as we taxied in, when we hit the rock, I shut the engine down like I always do. The current grabbed the plane, turned us sideways, and we started bouncing down the river. And our chief pilot, Luke, he's like, we're in it now, he says, as he jumps out into the water.
Crocodile infested.
There's crocs here. We don't know what's here. And I do distinctly remember feeling a little extra clunk on the plane, but we got it straightened out. We drug it up out of the current, which is what we're doing there. You can see Joel's a big help. He's out taking photos, and we're dragging the plane. It's up the.
Glad I brought this story up. I'm just getting thrown under the bus here.
When you told me this story, you neglected to mention that this was actually all your fault.
Yeah. So, anyways, total bad decision on my part, not realizing how strong that current was with the rocks. But we get it off the rocks, and we're ready to go. Long story short, and I'll keep it short because the details are not great, but we find there's a hole in the float, and it's filling up with water, and we're out in the middle of nowhere, and we don't have like anything to fix it with. So I put some speed tape on there. Joel and I pumped the floats out as fast as we could to try to beat the water that was coming in, and then we got out of there. But on takeoff, we felt like this catch, and we thought we hit a log, weren't sure. And I looked at Luke, and I said, I think with the gel coat ripped off the bottom of the float. And that's what happened. We ended up landing back at Karama, the capital.
And the danger is that, that turns into a boat real fast. It's going 60 miles an hour. So you have a small hole, all of a sudden it's a big hole. And the danger would have been if we would have tried to land on water back at Kapuna Hospital, the plane could have flipped. And so, we get back.
Leaking and flooding. And it was
back at Karama. You jump in a taxi and you buy out the hardware store of all the epoxy and all of South Papua New Guinea, and with your know-how, we're all mixing and applying, and by God's grace, it all worked out, and now it's just a funny story. That's apparently all my fault. So. But look at that location. I thought of Joseph actually there, because Joseph's a huge fisherman, and I'm like, this is like one of the most beautiful places I've ever been in my life.
It was a great idea, Joel, until it was a bad idea, right? No, it wasn't your fault that I made the bad decision where I docked. But it's a great story, and we all survived. That's the good news.
And and it was part of actually the purpose of going, was exploring and trying to figure out where are people. And the interesting thing that I noticed is everywhere we would land in that plane, every village, as soon as you'd even fly over, people would just come from all of a sudden you'd have 400 people on the banks wherever we would land that airplane. We landed here and didn't see anyone. We were there for probably an hour and a half, and so that was
we were
very
in
interesting.
The middle of nowhere.
It was very remote.
That was the land of the unexpected there for me personally. That's kind of a tagline for the country, land of the unexpected.
Cool.
It's a great tourism tagline.
Okay, so any other updates or questions that you want to ask? Because then I have a question for both of you guys on who you respond to.
Oh, let's see. We talked about the new airplane. We talked about the hospital. A lot of this is covered in the Dispatch series, and so I think that's self-explanatory. Just want to throw a little plug in there.
So if you haven't subscribed yet to nationsmedia.com, where you can, or not nationsmedia.co, where you can see the whole Dispatch.
Tell me more, Joseph.
Yeah, I mean, we got lots of great no. Head to the website, you can figure it out.
Yeah, why don't you hit them with the last question, and then we got hot takes. Yes. So do you want to do that right now, and then
hot takes? I mean, no, let's
wait on that.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
well, I can plug the Dispatch series too, if you want me to.
Well, I mean, we got that.
Yeah.
Guys, I was reading the Bible. I don't know if you guys read the Bible, but I do, just so you're aware. And last week it was 2 Corinthians chapter 5 verse 14, and it says, "For Christ's love compels us, because we are convinced that one died for all, and therefore all died. And he died for all, that those who live should no longer live for themselves, but for him who died for them and was raised again." And I was reading that, like, this idea of for Christ's love compels us, and what does that mean, like, to be compelled? It's almost like this intense need to do something. It's like it's an action. And I was thinking about Dispatch, and one of the challenges for us as an organization is, how do we tell our story in a way that compels somebody, that gives them that sense of urgency to do something, to react, to either go themselves, to follow whatever God's calling them to do, right? There's that action, or to reach in their pockets and donate and partner with us. And so just the struggle for a lot of organizations is, there's great stories, there's God stories all around us. But how do we get to tell those stories? And for us, that's what's exciting for me about Nations and about this series, is it's God stories. And the goal for me is that it compels people to do something. It compels people to strengthen their relationship with God. It compels people to look around their area and say, what are the needs here? What am I doing with my life? It's all about purpose and generosity, really the two things that bring happiness, and having God's purpose. But I'm just excited because I feel like the way you guys are telling our story is going to compel people to do something, to get engaged. And that's, for us as an organization, just really cool.
That's really cool. And I like that word, compel. We use the word invitation. It's accomplishing the same thing. And you think what was so incredible about Christ as a storyteller is his stories weren't all that spectacular. They're kind of strange and ethereal, and and people are kind of scratching their heads, but where they were so great, it was an invitation. Like, you get to be a part of this story. Right. And and that's the joy that Joseph has in editorial and I have in the film department, is that we get to, find people like yourself and everybody who's serving down at Samaritan Aviation, and invite our audience to just participate, just by listening and being encouraged and and partnering if the Holy Spirit moves in that way. And that's it is a joy to get to be able to do this. And thank you for saying that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, and it maps onto to curiosity, how we've been talking about that. Part of the point of this podcast too is we want to, what is that driving force that gets people out into the world? Well, I mean, it's, for us as believers, it's the love of God, that the overflow of that moves us out into the world, into places of brokenness, to try and be the hands and feet of Jesus and to share that love in tangible ways and spiritual ways and everything. But curiosity is also this really powerful motivator, right? If you are curious about the world, it's impossible to be cynical. Mm-hmm. If you're curious about the world, what happens when you're in a posture of curiosity? You move towards the thing that has captured your attention, And if our attention is captured by Jesus, and we see him all over the place, and we see the need, then it's impossible to not move towards it. So I love your description there, and thanks for sharing that passage of scripture. All right, you're hired. You're hired as a pitchman for this.
Yes, we need it.
We'll have you back. Okay, so my question that I love to hear you guys respond to, because you are both pilots. And I'm an aspiring pilot someday. My grandfather was a pilot. I wanted to I always wanted to be one. So thankfully I get to hang around you guys and draft.
So aspiring pilot,
Yep.
rookie pilot, veteran pilot, just to be clear.
Oh, the whole continuum. So in your story, you talk about how you had that powerful moment where you felt like God talked to you and said, "Hey, Mark, I want you to use your passion for people and for flight to serve people at the ends of the earth." And so we've talked a lot about how your love for God, and people is the kind of driving force behind Samaritan. But I kind of want to hear about you guys and almost the spirituality of flight, or how flight connects you to God and to other people. Because honestly, flight is ridiculous. I mean, it's something it's one of the most insane things that we as humans have figured out how to do, which is just astounding to me. And I know that, that I can still remember that first flight that I ever took. It was in 5th grade, and I was heading down to Guatemala to visit some villages that my dad worked with. And that sensation for the first time is something that will never leave me. So I'm curious, is flying just get old? Is it, am I over spiritualizing this? Or is there a kind of a spiritual component or any lessons that you guys have taken away as you guys have spent time in the air?
I've always thought of it this way. And I think when we get to heaven, we're going to be sitting around a bonfire and, all these people from all these, this is Joelology, by the way. This isn't out of the Bible or anything, but it's like, we're the 4th generation of pilots. Aviation's been around 120 years and just to be able to, be around that bonfire, when did you live? I was born in 1978. And well, did you get to fly in an airplane? And I just think it's always been, just the magic of flight has always been, really, I still feel like a little kid who, with his arms out wide, running around the front yard every time I get to power up a little Cessna and pull back on the yoke and take to the sky. And what I think is so special about it is that, to see it how you use aviation, Mark, is it takes that childlike awe and wonder of being able to take to the sky, and how every generation of mankind has always looked to the birds. I'm it'd be amazing to fly one day. And everybody has flying dreams. And now it's actually this holy invitation. I've put that in the heart of man, because one day, you're going to exist and you're going to, serve a people group that is basically unreachable, if not for a Cessna 206 on floats.
Yeah. Yeah. For me, it's I've always really seen God through creation in general. So whether it was surfing, a lot of my most greatest moments have been out surfing, and it's just communication with God. And he's spoken to me a lot out surfing and in nature, I've found. And so, flying is very similar. You see it from God's point of view a little bit. He's way up higher, but you're still seeing, and you also kind of realize how small we are. It really humbles you, because you just see a bunch of little cars down there. Especially the higher you get, the smaller everybody is. And so for me, that feeling is always awesome. I think the only time aviation, when there's aviation can get stressful, obviously, if that was a very stressful moment on the river there when we punched a hole in the float. When there's bad weather, when someone's dying, the fun is obviously not, you're not like, oh, I'm a little kid here at that time, right?
Right.
You're just like, I got to survive. I need to get down. The weather's bad, engine problems, whatever it is. I've had all of those things. The fun's over at that point and you're in survival mode. But I think it never gets old. Honestly, I flew last week, I several times, and every time it was just a joy to get in the plane and go and just be like, this is so cool. I've been doing it for 28 years, but it never gets old.
Yeah, flight's capacity to shift your perspective. I think that's one thing that faith does. That's one of the gifts and the challenges of faith is saying, well, hey, if we're more than just rational materialists, if we allow that there is a spiritual reality, and that God is real when we are going about our daily life, faith is that thing that shifts our perspective, that asks us to look at brokenness differently and say, or to look at somebody who's an enemy differently. Like in your context, this idea of grace is this radical perspective shift. And yeah, I know anytime I've climbed into an airplane, that's one of the things that the stresses and the anxieties that I have, the petty ones that are usually so egocentric that I climb into the plane with, are quickly left behind, and it's easier for me to slow down and to ask the larger questions like, hey, what am I not seeing here in my life? So I think it's really beautiful.
It's cool.
Well, I think we're coming in for a landing pun.
Ooh,
like,
I like that.
Are we a short final, or are we is this a 5 mile final, or is this a short final?
Well, we got some hot takes.
We got some hot
Yeah,
takes.
this might be like a segment that we're gonna try. Hot takes. So Joel's prepared
You're a good guinea pig.
Good guinea pig. From
Great.
Papua New Guinea.
These have to be quick answers too. All right, we don't want like long-winded Mark here. You
This
gotta,
is
you gotta,
short-winded
you gotta,
Mark?
you gotta shorten it up. You gotta shorten it up. All right. Best aviation movie from the '80s: Top Gun or Iron Eagle?
The Top Gun.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay, that's good. Top Gun or Top Gun Maverick?
Top Gun.
Okay, old
a
school.
class there,
I love it.
Yeah, I,
love
had
it.
to think about it because they're both very good.
Okay, better climate: Wewak, Papua New Guinea, or San Diego, California?
Man, that's a tough one. For surfing, Papua New Guinea. For pickleball, San Diego.
What about for aviation?
They're both similar. A lot of clouds. We get a lot of fog here, and in the
layer.
summertime, marine layers. So over there, it's rain and big thunderstorms.
All right, we're going to test your pickleball knowledge here. Where was pickleball invented?
When and where?
Yeah, when and where?
When and where? Oh
Yeah.
my gosh!
Let's go.
I think it
national
was
champion.
in the '70s in Seattle area.
Well, you're wrong.
Close, but
Sorry. You're dealing with two guys here from the Pacific Northwest.
Pacific
So
County
the
pickleball,
year
yeah,
was
horseshoes.
the year mark was 1965.
Ooh, I was just off by 5 years.
Location, actually, an island nation known as Bainbridge Island.
Bainbridge Island.
Near Seattle.
Yep.
Yes.
By
Okay, come on.
Joel Pritchard, Bill Bell, and Barney McCollum. Okay, so now you know
Three
you're.
men who changed the world.
Yes.
That's by a game. We grew up playing in like PE up in
Oh, yeah.
Washington. You know, it'd be raining outside, and so you couldn't do like any field activities. So we they're like, oh, pickleball invented over on Bainbridge Island. Now it's like the most popular sport in the world. So
I have heard it was named after the guy's dog, Pickle.
I think.
I think you're right.
But that could be a
Not true,
folklore.
An excellent urban legend that we should perpetuate.
Exactly.
That's right. That's right. Okay, best food in the Papua New Guinea backcountry, in the bush.
Oh, in the bush, smoked fish.
What fish?
It's like, well, they have they have tilapia, and they have
How about that Spanish mackerel that I caught?
well, you said backcountry, bush. I'm thinking village.
Okay,
like river.
okay. So this is like
you're talking about the
ocean
coast.
fish.
Yeah, you're talking about
Okay.
ocean fish.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure, Spanish mackerel.
Okay.
You're talking about that fish that you're too afraid to hold?
Yeah, yeah.
Exactly. He did hold
We
it.
talked about this in the first episode. I have a fear of
Yeah.
fish. My goodness. So, yeah.
But honestly, I've had yellowfin over there that even tops that.
yeah.
Yeah, that's pretty good stuff.
Okay, worst food in the Papua New Guinea bush.
Sack.
What is that?
Sack is a starch from a sago palm tree, and it's made two ways. It's jelly form, which is basically like eating balls of snot. that
Like my fear of fish is his
and
like
and
for sack.
out in the village they make it into a pancake. Neither way is good. And
It's like tofu. It takes on whatever is around it.
yeah,
kind
and
of the same.
they
flavor.
really enjoy it if it's a little fermented, which adds a little
Of course.
yes, a little extra flavor, as they say.
San Diegans, those kombucha lovers around here would probably take right.
They'd
Right
be-
at it.
they'd be
Yeah,
all
they're
over it. All right, what's the most fun word to say in Tok-Pisin?
And please use it in a sentence.
Oh man, the most fun word. Well, it's funny. We use the word ass a lot in Tok-Pisin because, growing up, that was a really bad word, right? I could never say that. But in Tok-Pisin, mi talk ass blong ting ting blong mi, and me like audim talk lo papa god. So basically, the ass is used for everything. That was the foundation of a thought. Is called ass. The back of the airplane is ass blong balus. Balus is the airplane. Back of the airplane. So yeah, you get to use that word a lot, and that's kind of fun. As a
And
kid
you don't
growing
get
up
detention
in a pastor's family, it's like I could use that. But coming home, it's always like, kids, we're going back to the school, a Christian school. Don't use the word ass anymore, please. It doesn't work over here.
That's hilarious.
Yeah, so that's kind of a fun one. And Os place, you'd say, hey, Os place blue, and money. It's like, where are you from?
Yeah.
And the literal translation is, where did you sit your ass as a kid? Ass place.
That's amazing.
Dude, that's so great. How long did it take you to learn that?
It took a while. Our new staff gets to go over and do 3 months of language, culture, and they have to get to actually a certain level before we'll let them fly the airplane and things like that. Because Joel mentioned earlier, you got 100 villagers running at the airplane, and if you don't know how to communicate, they're grabbing stuff and grabbing the wings and stuff like that. So I had to just learn it. So I just learned it from the people. Took a little longer. Yeah.
Well, Mark, man, it's you've brought so much joy to my life and our friendship, and just your encouragement to kind of have that single focus on what it is that God's calling us to, and have that be willing to take that that long journey of faith to see the fruit of the calling of God. And so we're so thankful for you and your friendship, and I look forward to going back to PNG here in a couple of weeks and doing some more filming for the Dispatch series, telling more stories about your staff and the people who have said yes alongside of you. It's incredible. Like, your wife is, you guys, you look like the quintessential San Diego couple, but you're actually out of place here in San Diego. Like that's your home. You fit in there. And anyways, it's just incredible. So thank you for being on the podcast.
Thanks,
and
guys.
Joseph and I are still, we're still figuring out this whole podcast thing. So thanks for making it fun and telling such great stories.
I thought you were going to say we're still figuring out our pickleball game because we
That too, yeah, we did. Don't tell Mark that. He's gonna
Makes
hold
me
it
feel
against
good.
we got to stay home.
Yeah. So
Yeah, thanks, guys.
Yeah, thanks so much, Mark. Joel, before we leave,
yeah.
Any tantalizing teasers or updates from the world of film?
Oh yes, actually, we do have episode 2 of Mark's series on Dispatch. So coming out, I think next week, if I'm right.
Yeah,
We just finished the edit.
Yep.
It's going to go to color and get
Once
sound
you fix the
design.
things that Mark didn't like about it.
Yeah, he's so needy.
Sorry, we can't give you hair.
Yeah.
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
what
I tried. You think with post-production you could do something for me.
Well, as two guys who are well on their way of male pattern baldness, do you have any tips for us? It's like, do you just shave it or
Got to embrace it.
just go for it? Huh?
I embraced it at a young age, and now honestly, nobody in New Guinea would even know who I was if I put hair back
you
on.
Look good. You look like a spry Andre Agassi.
Well, thank you, Joel.
Yeah.
Appreciate that.
A slightly less muscular Mr. Clean.
Okay. I mean, I don't know if I like that totally, but
You don't like that one as much as the Andre.
Oh man.
that's good.
Yeah.
Well, and Joseph, how about you? Any updates from editorial?
Yeah, well, if you didn't already get a chance to read the article that we released this week.
So good.
I was really excited for us to release this one. It's from the field. It's out in Afghanistan, and it's this incredible story of this French woman who, talk about courage, talk about long suffering, talk about a willingness to go into hard and broken places. She's been working in Afghanistan with the disabled community and a number of different things, and left and has gone back, and so it's a story worth checking out. And we've got some fun ones coming out in the next couple of weeks that I will leave unnamed for suspense's sake.
I like that. Quick update too here at Nations Media as we grow this platform. Again, we just want to say thank you for working out all the bugs as we go along. And the website is coming along. So we've got a new designer who's stepping in there doing an incredible job. And so we look forward to revealing the new website here in the next couple of weeks. And just to have a beautiful place to host these stories and these video content. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's good. And an app coming soon, too. So a lot of things in the works.
Wow, an app?
Wow, there's
That's
an app
how
for that.
You've really made it as a media company when you have your own app.
Tell you what.
And one thing, guys, I got to plug. Go to SamaritanAviation.org to learn more. Get on it. Sign up on our newsletter as well. You can go to some Facebook, Samaritan Aviation, Instagram stories daily that are going out. Follow us, pray for us, connect. That's what we would hope for you to come out of this. So.
Yeah, we'll put all that in the show notes. Is that what you call it?
Yes, show
learning
notes.
learning the vocabulary.
On the podcast platform, that's what we call it, show notes. I mean, I guess that worked too for the video side.
Sure.
On Vimeo or YouTube.
And to close this out, we do want to invite you to subscribe to the platform. It's a huge help to us, and it does give you all the access to all these incredible stories that are coming out and video content. You can do that at nations.co. So thank you for tuning in this week. Joseph, final words?
No final words.
That's it.
I'm at a loss for words.
Over and out from Nations Media.
Thanks, Mark.
Yeah.
Thanks, Mark.